Hello my friends, Jeanette here with Vivo Vintage Designs. So welcome to today's tutorial. Today we're going to paint some simple cosmos and I'm going to show you a very easy way of doing it. I'm using Fluid 100% cotton watercolor paper, my Muño pan paints, and some silver black velvet brushes. So if you stick around to the end of the video, you will see a picture of the finished painting, and I will also provide this outline. You can pause the video, take a screenshot of it and print it out. I'll also provide it to you on our Facebook group, Vivo Vintage Design Tutorials. And to trace the painting, all you have to do is scribble some pencil on the back of your printout, put it down on your watercolor paper, and use a pencil to trace it. So to start with, I want to create a very fuzzy background, but only in between the flowers. So I'm wetting down the area and I'm going beyond where I will be adding paint. And I'm going to wet down the area and then I'm going to drop some greens in there. Now, if I'm moving too fast in this video, because I did speed it up, you can slow it down in your settings. So here I'm dropping in a little olive green and I'm using the tip of my brush to move it around and to get it in between the petals and around the petals as well. And you can see that as I move outward, I want to fade that color out just a little bit more. So I'll be dipping my brush in some clean water and blending it out. Now I'm trying to create some of those leaves. You saw what they look like. They're very spindly. So I've switched over to my size 0 silver black velvet brush, and while the background is still wet, I'm going to add some of those leaves here and there, and they're going to fade into the water or blend with the water, so they'll be nice and soft. And then later on towards the end of the video, I will add a little bit more once the background is completely dry to make those stand out a little bit more. But in the meantime, I'm just using a combination of, what was it? Olive brown and olive green. And here I went onto my petal. So I'm using my Rosemary & Co. Eradicator brush to lift that little oops up from my petal. Now to start these petals, I am going to wet down just one petal at a time. And while that petal is still wet, I'm going to drop in the color Cold Pink. And you can see that I have diluted the color so that it's not very bright. It's nice and soft. And once I've added that color around the top, the sides, and the bottom of the petal, I'm picking up a heavier consistency of that cold pink and dropping it in at the base and at the tip of the petal. And again, while the paper is still damp, I'm using my size 0 black velvet brush to draw that paint from the tip to the base to create the veins in each petal. Very simple technique. It doesn't take a lot of effort, and you can decide where you want your veins, or you don't have to add any at all. Now, because the first petal is still wet, I am skipping a petal and moving on to the one next to the that's not next to the wet petal. Because if you paint a petal next to one that is still wet, your colors will run from one petal to the other. So it's really important that you don't paint next to a wet petal. So again, I've wet down the petal and now I've added the diluted cold pink, and now I've added the more concentrated cold pink at the base and the tip, and I'm just running the brush through those colors from the top to the bottom to create the veins. So I'm going to continue with this process and I'm going to paint every other petal. And once I'm finished with this one, I'll move to the one on the bottom. so that I give these petals a chance to dry before I start doing the ones in between. So it's a really good idea to mix your colors ahead of time so that you're ready to add your paint and you're not trying to mix colors while your paper is drying. So again, using that soft pink, the diluted one, gives me a nice base for the darker color and for the veins, or rather the heavier consistency of the cold pink. And of course, if you don't have these colors, use whatever you have. Whatever matches closest. It doesn't even have to be pinks. It can be whatever color you like. And when you wet down your petals, make sure that they're not sopping wet, that you don't have puddles of water, and give it just a couple of seconds to be absorbed by the paper before you start adding your paint. Otherwise, your paint won't spread. It'll just pool in the puddle. And you can see that that's what's happening to me here. I had too much water on my petal. So again, I'm using the smaller brush. I am outlining the leaf, rather the petal, and then pulling that darker color from the tip of the petal to the base. Now we're switching to the bottom flower while we wait for those 4 top petals to dry. And here I've wet down the petal again as I did on the ones above, and I'm using the color Permanent Violet. And I'm just going around the outline of the petal. And now I'm using a brush to move it around because this one I didn't add enough water, so the color wasn't moving at all. So I'm just using a clean damp brush to kind of pull that paint into the center of the petal. And then I added a little bit more of the permanent purple, or violet rather, and then using the same technique as I did for the ones above, and using my smaller brush to pull the veins out from top to bottom. While you watch me paint these petals, I'll remind you that all the products used are linked in the description box. You can click on the link where it says products used in this video, and it will bring you to my Amazon store where you'll see the full list of the products used. And as an Amazon associate, I do receive a small commission for any items purchased using my links, but that is at absolutely no extra charge to you. And thank you to those of you who do make purchases using my links. It's a really wonderful way to help support my channel, and I really do appreciate it. So thank you again. Also, for those who don't know, we have a Facebook group called Veeble Vintage Design Tutorials. And in that group, you can post pictures of your versions of the paintings and techniques learned on this channel. We have such a great group of members. They're so supportive and they're so incredibly talented. So if you're ever having issues with one of the paintings and you need some help, a little guidance, you can always reach out to me on the group. I'm really active, and our members, again, are very supportive, and they're always happy to offer advice when asked. And you can always showcase your paintings learned on this channel in that group. So I do hope that you consider joining. Okay, so here we are. I've painted all the petals in between, and now we're going to paint the centers. I'm wetting down the center of the flower, and I'm dropping in a little bit of lemon yellow. And then I'm using the smaller brush to push it to the edge of the petals. And I'm doing the same on the one below. But I touched the purple because I didn't switch to the smaller brush, and it started to run into the yellow. But it worked out okay. Sometimes they're happy accidents, as Bob Ross would say. Now using the smaller brush, I've picked up a little bit of orange, and because the paper is still damp, I'm just dotting a little bit of the orange, tiny little dots, and it's blending into the yellow, and it's creating a very soft transition between colors. And now I'm adding a little bit of Van Dyke brown at the bottom to create some shadow. And then I'll clean off my brush a little bit if I feel it's too dark in the water, and dab it on my paper towel, and I'll soften those colors up a little bit so the transition between the colors is a little bit softer. So the yellow dried at the bottom center flower, rather in the center of the bottom flower. So I had to wet it down a little bit again. And I am just repeating the same process, dotting with the orange. As I move up to where I want my highlight to be, I make the dots further apart, and now I'm just adding the Van Dyke brown. So this is the end of the video. I hope that you've enjoyed this and that you give it a try. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you have any questions, please leave it in the comments. I will always get back to you. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.